Hello, everybody, and today we are back with another. Well, actually, I haven't even posted in about half of a month. It's been about 2 weeks since the election. This is going to be an election recap video, so I'm going to be talking about my prediction, where I went right, where I went wrong, and just an overall recap of the 2020 election. Now that essentially all the results are in, obviously Trump is contesting the election. And we'll wait to see what happens there. The electors don't get certified, I believe, until December. So, actually, later in December. Um, and they don't vote till early January, I don't think. Maybe it's in December. But we'll see what happens there. But obviously, we do have most of the results in. Biden does look like he won. I did have Trump winning, but let's get right to it. We're going to go over everything. And I'll start with, and in case you guys didn't notice, this is my website. I do have an election website. I can put that in the description of the video today. And I've essentially had this video or this website for about a month and a half. So I try to mention in other videos, but I don't know if you guys picked it up or not. But so here it is. So, and it's not completely finished. It's almost finished though. This was my presidential election prediction. Obviously, Trump lost. I do admit, in my last election prediction, wildly overestimated Trump. I definitely thought that he was going to outperform the polls drastically. Now, don't get me wrong, he outperformed the polls like I said he would. It just wasn't as big of the margins as was predicted. Yeah, so he obviously, with Minnesota, he didn't outperform as much as he did in 2016. Wisconsin was about the same. Michigan, he outperformed not as much as 2016. Pennsylvania, he outperformed. I know the RCP had it close with Pennsylvania, but that was honestly because of the Trafalgar Group and the Republican pollsters. Every other poll, if you look at Pennsylvania, I actually don't have the map up. Pull it up. If you look at all the quote A plus pollsters from 538, it was Biden up like 6 points in Pennsylvania, which did not happen at all. I'm pretty sure every single state overestimated Biden's chances. Every single state is, even this, but what I'm talking about is Trafalgar, Susquehanna, and Insider Advantage. When you look at the other polls, NBC News, A plus pollster, CNBC, but if you just go back, like literally days before the election, Biden was up. I mean, this is 2 days before the election, and the polls narrowed up. But if you go back a few days before the election, it's pretty clear, pretty obvious at least, that Trump outperformed all of these polls because, that's exactly what I predicted. So I actually do put more faith in the Trafalgar Group's polls than any of these pollsters at all because they all got it wrong. The ABC News, Washington Post poll, which is supposed to be A plus, got it dead off, and a bunch of groups, according to 538, which I think has lost all credibility at this point. But when we look at my prediction, and if you watch the video, you can see that essentially all of the margins except for three major states of Minnesota, I won't even count Michigan, Minnesota, maybe Michigan and Nevada, I pretty much was on the line, on the ball with Georgia, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. They were all very, very close to my predictions. I had Trump all tilting them for a win. Georgia, there's obviously a recount, a lot of things popping up out of there. We don't know exactly what's happening right now. It looks like Biden won by about 0.2%, 0.3%. But we'll see what happens out of there. But all of these, essentially, I was very, very close with it at least. I did have them slightly going to Trump. In this case, in the election, they did slightly go to Biden. Trump outperformed all of the polls in all these states. However, I just happened to have him outperforming a little bit more. Actually, in Minnesota, Trump did do better with the polls. I mean, did worse than what the polls had him predicted. And Minnesota is probably the worst one that I could have picked. I had Minnesota going to Trump. I thought he could win. He didn't win. But what I'm looking at right now is, yeah, he did lose Minnesota by around 7 points. Wisconsin, Biden won by 6 points. Pennsylvania's 1 point. Michigan, that's about 2.4 points, 6 points. My math is not the best. But all these are Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. Very, very close tilt margin. As well as Arizona, which I think I did have tilting to Biden. Looks like he wins it by 0.3 and Georgia by 0.3. So these two states are probably things that definitely show the new trends in the country. Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, flipping back to Biden, at least for now. And just imagine if a different candidate ran. I mean, they would have gotten blown out in my mind. If anybody else than Joe Biden from Pennsylvania, that's honestly his whole appeal is the Rust Belt. And he lost Ohio by 8 points, same margin in 2016. I don't know why the hell the state was a toss-up. I don't know why the hell Iowa was a toss-up. It makes no sense. The Florida polls were off. So polls were off again. And even more so when we look at the Senate and the House. But my prediction wasn't right. I'm definitely going to be improving. I'm going to be fixing it. When 2022 comes up, I'm going to learn from my mistakes. I'm definitely going to understand that Nevada is still a state that is kind of like North Carolina with Republicans and Democrats, has a higher proportion of Democrats than Republicans. Probably won't have that going to a Republican in 4 years unless something crazy happens. And Minnesota and the Rust Belt, I do think that will shift eventually. That obviously didn't happen this election. I mean, Trump did win the Rust Belt last election, but it's definitely trending in the right direction for Republicans. With Georgia, I had that as a tilt for Trump. Obviously, Biden tilted to win. We still have to see what happens if he did win Georgia, in fact. But I did get Florida right. I got North Carolina right. I got Ohio and Iowa right. I mean, that was like a joke. Texas, Nebraska second. I did mess that up. But overall, when you look at the margins that I had with the leans and tilts, it was pretty accurate. Now, obviously, the electoral count is not exactly accurate. It's kind of flipped 306, 220, or 232. But that was my presidential election prediction. Now, the Senate election prediction is looking like I got the numbers exactly right, 52-48, except I messed up with Maine and Arizona. Susan Collins won Maine. I had her winning Maine earlier in the year. McSally winning Arizona, or Kelly winning Arizona early in the year. I did flip the 2 seats for the last prediction. But it does look like I'm getting the count right. Obviously, the George is not in yet, but Purdue is looking like he'll beat Ossoff, and we haven't really seen any of the actual polls between Kelly and Warnock because we've just seen all of the runoff polls. Because it was, she was being primaried essentially in the general election. But the Senate election poll, my Senate election prediction was actually pretty good, pretty accurate. And when we talk about the Senate election polls, those were just awful. Those were terrible. I honestly don't know how else to put this. Maine should have been likely Republican. Iowa should have been lean likely Republican. Montana's likely Republican. And then when you take a look at, when you take a look at the Senate RCP map, it's just insane. South Carolina is safe to likely Republican. Sorry, that's the wrong site. But let's take a look, because the Senate polls were, even worse than the presidential polls. And that's saying something. South Carolina is a toss-up. Okay. Lindsey Graham won South Carolina by 10 points. The polls were terrible. Absolutely shit in that state. Pardon my language, but the polls were terrible there. In Maine, Susan Collins wins by 8 points, give or take 0.1%. The polls in Maine had Gideon up. If you average that out, she's up like 5 points in the state. That's like a poll off by like 14 points. It does not get any worse than that. And Susan Collins actually won by 8.8 points, it looks like. So, it's just remarkable. That's just, you can't get any worse than that in Maine. When we take a look at North Carolina, and I did not predict Maine, but I did take some of the polls into account. I think that that's reasonable. I don't know if I'm going to be able to. I don't even think I can trust the polls from now on. Essentially, all my election predictions are going to have to be trends and gut instinct, and maybe a little bit of polls that are actually credible, polls that haven't made a joke of themselves over the last 4 to 8 years, including the midterms, which I've made videos about. When we look at North Carolina, overestimating Cal Cunningham again. This is now overestimated by 4-ish points. Overestimated by 4 points. And it's always overestimated for the Democrat. Now, I don't know if that's for any reasons or not. But it is a bit strange how this always happens like this. But yeah, Tillis won by 1.7. Same margin as 2014. Cal Cunningham didn't win. He looked like he was going to win. Many who predicted that he would win, and he did not win. Georgia, I'm not really going to go into yet because we'll see the results in January, but the polls seem to be off in Georgia too. Georgia as well. I mean, with Purdue's race at least, but let's take a look at the other things. In Michigan, the polls were off. Gary Peters wins by around 1.5 points. Polls had him up 5.5-ish points. I mean, how is this possible? How can you mess up this bad? I don't understand. When you look at Arizona, Kelly won by around 3.5 points. Let's take a look. So, overestimating there too. But the funniest things are Montana, which was a toss-up state, South Carolina, which was toss-up, Maine was toss-up, and Iowa was toss-up. When you look at this, I'm not going to click it because it takes so much time, but Ernst was up 1.4 points, and actually, that was all because of like 3 polls in the end. That was all because like 3 polls in the end. If you look at the entire lead up to the election, Greenfeld, I'll click on it. I did click on it, but Greenfeld was up. Ernst won by around 6.6 points. The whole spread went up for Ernst, which was because of the Des Moines Register poll, which is one of the most accurate polls in Maine that you can judge things off, Quinnipiac, and Insider Advantage. These Greenfeld polls with Emerson and all these A-plus pollsters, CBS, New York Times, I mean, had her up 2, and this was in September. It's not like 8% of the whole population in Iowa is going to shift their vote in a month and a half. This poll was off. I mean, this poll is just a joke. It's all a joke. It's ridiculous. These polls in Iowa, these were off by around 5 points. If you judge it off the polls before they narrowed up, they were off by probably around 11 to 12 points. Iowa was a complete screw-up. And Montana was just Daines won the state by 10 points. Or not Steve Daines. Steve Bullock won the state by 10 points. I don't know what happened. Let's see. Let's go back to the Senate map. So we'll take a look at Steve Bullock because he won this by 10 points. And RCP had this as a toss-up race. The last poll had Bullock up 1. There was 2 polls that were even remotely accurate. That was actually the Emerson poll, which screwed up the other one. The Emerson polls were the ones that were closest to accurate. And every other poll was just dead off. Just completely dead off. Every single poll underestimated Daines. Even the Daines plus 9 poll underestimated him. Daines plus 2. I mean Bullock plus 2. Daines plus 1. Tie. Daines plus 1. Daines plus 3. Bullock plus 1. 2 polls that were even kind of close. This is even 4 points off. So 1 poll that you could have any sort of judgment on. I mean, that's pathetic. That's just pathetic. The polling was terrible. So I've went through all the Senate. I know I've probably spoken more about how bad the polls were because they were terrible. And I did predict that they would be terrible, so I give myself credit for that. Senate prediction, looks like the numbers were right. 2 of the seats were flip-flopped, but I give myself credit for getting the numbers correctly with my Senate prediction. Governor prediction was right. That's probably the easiest to predict, but, I can pat myself on the back for that. Vermont, New Hampshire. Obviously, right now, Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, very, very nervous about things if Joe Biden does get inaugurated. If these senators, such as Bernie Sanders, tries to join the administration, then that means that Senate seat's going to be open. And as of now, there's a Republican governor who just was elected in Vermont, and he will be able to replace Bernie Sanders' seat, at least for 6 months, with a senator. So now I'm not saying that the special election would give a victory for the Republican incumbent, I guess at the time, if Bernie Sanders did in fact join the Joe Biden administration, if he's even confirmed on by the Senate. But, that's why Chuck Schumer and the rest of the Democrats, as well as Nancy Pelosi and even Joe Biden, are a bit worried. Now, I'll probably go over the demographics in a different video, but that's another important thing to talk about. Montana went red, North Carolina went blue, and the North Carolina governor polls were underestimated as well. I don't know if they have it. But with North Carolina, we'll see. I didn't really look into this much, but this was just dead off as well. I mean, this was toss-up state. I mean, he won by 4.4. He did win. The RCP average had Cooper up 11. The NBC A plus poll plus 19. The New York Times A plus poll plus 9. I mean, this is just how you can't get this bad at it. I mean, this is just terrible. No, I don't really know the Montana. I know the Republican one in Montana, but I mean, it's just pathetic. And I'll probably continue to say that for the next 4 years. He won by 13 points and it was a toss up. I mean, oh, was it a toss up? Maybe it was a lean Republican. I don't know. Oh no, it was a toss up. Okay, well that's even worse. Maybe RCP needs to make sure they know where they're placing their seats. But he won by 13 points and it was a toss up. Okay, now we're gonna go to the House. And the House, I didn't make a whole House map because that takes a lot of effort and time to literally dive into every single seat. There's so many different seats, so many toss-up seats, at least with RCP, even though this was ridiculous. 44 toss-up seats, a bunch of lean seats, and I just thought that would take too much time. I did obviously have a prediction. If you did have look on my website, my prediction was a 224 to 211. So I was actually very, very close at the House election prediction, which I'm pretty proud of. Most of the people, 538 had the Democrats getting at least like 5 seats, and that would have been like a bad night for the Democrats. Well, you take a look at this, Republicans have a +8 net gain so far in the House, and it looks like that they're going to continue to expand their minority because it looks like the Democrats do have the House majority at the moment. If you go over here, David Valadao beating TJ Cox incumbent. I don't know why the New York Times hasn't called this, but it looks like he's going to be ousted from his seat, TJ Cox, or I guess removed, whatever. And the incumbent Republican over here in California does look like he's going to hold on to that seat barely, but it's a hold on. So that is 206 seat for the Republicans. Now, I don't really know about this yet. They pretty much have stopped counting, which is a bit weird, but just like they did on election night in some of those Rust Belt states, which I think is pretty odd to do. Definitely questionable. I know they had to get the mail-in ballots in, but they were able to start counting as soon as the polls closed. So I don't know what happened. Over here, I mean, I don't know why they haven't called this either. That's 207 for the Republicans. I mean, I know there's mail-in ballots still to come in, but that's looking good for the Republicans. I won't characterize anything yet. Over here, Democrats are up. That's 207. This looks like the Republicans going to win. That's 208. And this is looking good for the Republicans as well, 209. And over here, also looking good for the Republicans, 210. So 210, pretty much right now looking like the Republicans the least that they will get now. Now that's going to be a gain of around 10 seats. And many people had the Democrats gaining, and look at 538 gaining at least 5 points. On average time, 10 points, but definitely a lot more flips. Some of the suburbia areas, Democrats had 3 flips. Nothing for the Republicans to really stress out about. Over here in New Mexico, I'm not sure how to pronounce her name, but Yvette Harrell has taken back her seat, won by around 8 points. Or actually, 8 points-ish. 7.7 or 8, whatever. But the polls got the House wrong as well. They got everything wrong. And they did this. They had the same issue in 2016 with the Senate seats in 2014. So it's very sad because you should be able to have some trust in the polls. But I mean, they were just off. They were off. They did 224. So I said right now the Republicans have at least 210. So my prediction looks like it's going to be very, very close. And I'm proud of that as well. More accurate than 538 by like 40 seats. So maybe that's a little bit too nice. Maybe 20 seats. But I mean, they do that for a living. Maybe they should hire me. I don't know. But this is my prediction with the House and the governor and Senate. The presidential one was probably the more definitely worst one. But I was just basing off the assumption that the polls were going to be off. The polls were off again, but they just weren't off nearly as much by tilt margins in the states that Trump needed to win. Obviously, there's going to be recounts and lawsuits, but the polls were pretty much off in all the states, with the exception of like Minnesota and Nevada, and I guess Nebraska second. But yeah, so I mean that is essentially an overview of everything. When we take a look, some surprising things that I noticed is the New York results had Biden won by 12.7 points. Now that's probably a bit scary for Democrats, since Clinton won by 21 points and Obama won it by almost 30 points. Biden won it by 12.7. I mean, Trump overperformed these polls, this poll by what, a good 20 points. I mean, I could have guessed better on the New York seat than these polls. If you had like my brother just guess a random margin that somebody would win by, he'd have a better chance of being more accurate than these pollsters. But yeah, a bit surprising. Now, I'm not saying that I did have Connecticut and Oregon; they're all trending red. They did go a little bit trend back to the blue. I guess that was a little bit expected, given that Trump won last election, so it would have been a little bit of a referendum, even if Trump won again. But this is a bit surprising with New York, and that's something that I think Democrats need to keep an eye open for. Hopefully, the NYPD endorsed Trump, and maybe some people were angry at what was going on in New York, but that was a safe Democrat state. When you look at the results, then that's more of a lean, likely Democrat state. But yeah, Trump overperformed in Texas, where usually Republicans tend to underperform. He was up by 1.3 in the polls. He overperformed by around 4.5 points. Always underestimating the Republicans. He overperformed in Arizona. Does look like he lost Arizona, but he overperformed it. I mean, if you get rid of the Trafalgar Group poll, like these two Republican polls, and you just include the 538 A+ polls, Trump drastically overperformed, obviously including the Trafalgar +3 and the Rasmussen, which is another Republican pollster, Trump +4, which are off also. I'm not going to deny that, but the RCP averages would have been worse. I don't blame RCP for this, because they just averaged the polls out. I blame the pollsters for it, for doing, frankly, a terrible job at polling. Trump won Maine second. This is another joke. I mean, every single Biden poll except for the Bangor Daily News had Biden up, and Quinnipiac. I mean, just look at this. He's up 3, he's up 4, he's up 4, 3, 2. Trump won by 7. So if you take averaging out all the polls, you say, okay, I'm just looking at it for a second, Biden up 3 in the average. That means Trump overperformed by 7.7 points. That's a sad thing. So my predictions, I think, were pretty good. Presidential, obviously off by a decent amount of electoral votes. Not the margins, though. If you look at the margins, they were very, very close. If they swung one way or the other way, my prediction would have been a lot more accurate. But nonetheless, with all of the chaos with the polling and how bad the polls were, and how and honestly everything that's happened since then, I think that I did a pretty good job at my first election prediction. I guess not my last, obviously. Hopefully I'll be able to continue to make predictions in 2022 and 2024. But continuing, hopefully this channel grows. I really appreciate all the support I've gotten up until the election day. But this is my election recap video. If you guys managed to watch it all the way to the end, thank you so much for watching. And frankly, if you guys watched my previous videos consistently, thank you guys for watching all of those videos as well. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel. I really appreciate it. The upcoming videos are going to be focusing maybe on some of the Georgia runoff races, but I'm not really that interested in it. I'm actually more interested in the demographics, voting, and the trends of states is what I actually am most interested in. But I'd be more than happy to talk about Georgia if you guys preferred that. polling errors. I mean, that's something that ticks me off a lot because, I mean, I don't know how these people still have credibility. 2016, okay, maybe they adjusted. 2018, the House was right. I mean, you can just always have an excuse. The Senate was terrible in 2018. Then you go to 2020. Okay, they probably adjusted. Looks like Biden's going to win 413 electoral votes. Now, I had that as my Biden best case scenario. And it could have been the best case scenario for Biden. But, I mean, that's not what happened. The polls were dead off. I mean, Trump plus 1 in Texas. Biden up 17 in Wisconsin. Biden up 7 in Pennsylvania. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I'll probably have more videos reacting to all of this. Um, anyway, thank you for watching. Check out my website. It's going to be in the description. I have some editorials and stuff like this. Contact if you guys wanted to email me a question. You can obviously just comment stuff in the description, and I'll usually get back to you. But I haven't written all of these. I probably won't write all of these. But I try and be fair. Try and take my bias out of everything. But if you take a look, this is RBG. This is just kind of like a regular news editorial where I talk about the death of RBG and all the news upcoming. Hidden Trump vote, the poll problem, and I wrote, that's actually a title. I didn't finish that, but that was created on October 15th. So, I definitely called this a lot long before many people realize this, which is a bit sad because all you have to do is look at the previous election polling. But okay, thank you for watching. Please subscribe to my channel, like the video, stay tuned for more videos. Comment in the description if you have any ideas, because now we're probably going to be moving into a year to a year and a half of no elections, and then we have 2022, so it's going to be a little bit harder to create videos in the next year and a half, but I'll definitely continue to make videos. I'll probably be doing a lot of 2024 possible primary scenarios, 2024 predictions. I don't know, Kamala Harris versus Mike Pence. If Trump runs for re-election again in 2024, then we can do some of that stuff and a bunch of things. If Biden, I don't really don't know if Biden's going to run in 2024, but we'll see what happens. Okay, thank you for watching my videos. Stay tuned. Have a nice day.